Okay, so hello everybody, and thank you for coming along to our talk. I'm Paul Rudman from recently from the University of Leicester in the UK, still at Leicester, but now self-employed. And we also have Christian Angel. Oh dear, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Please pronounce your name, Christian.
In Spanish, is Christian Angel Rueda.
Yes, that's what I meant. Who is a PhD candidate, almost finished, almost there, aren't you? At the University of Querétaro in Mexico. Very nice place. And now I'd recommend it. And we also have Juan Carlos. Go on, Christian. Say it for me, please.
Yes. Juan Carlos is my teacher in the PhD. He helped me making this research, and he likes very much the 3D platforms. But right now he has traveling and have problem with his avatar.
And how do you pronounce his name? That's my question.
Okay. His name is Juan Carlos Valdés Godínes. It's in Spanish.
Yes, I really should learn Spanish, shouldn't I? So between us, we've written a paper which is looking at the way in which previous virtual worlds, virtual spaces, virtual realities, augmented realities, how they can be brought together with a general view and categorization in a way that would help educators in the future when new technologies come out, instead of having to start from the beginning to say, well, what can this technology do, to go to the categorization and look at the way in which the technology provides affordances for educators, and then go from there as to the type of pedagogy that it would be useful to use with that new technology. And in doing so, we have been looking at the way in which students are taught and learn within schools and universities, and the way in which perhaps the more regimented methods of the past may not be the best methods for the future. And then I have been looking at the way in which previous research into a specific three-dimensional interactive digital environment, the virtual worlds here, have been used in the past, and some of the lessons we've learned from those, and the way in which those lessons could be applied to future technologies as and when they come out. So that produces 3 sections, as it were, to the paper, which you're welcome to download from that little box on my left. It's an open source one, so you can just download and read it. And we're going to give a little talk about the 3 sections. Christian is going to begin with his categorization scheme, and then Juan Carlos, hopefully he'll be able to join us, is going to talk about the way in which schools and universities used to teach and ways in which that could be improved. And then finally I'm going to talk about the way in which new technologies can learn from what is now past technologies, even though we're actually sitting in one. So I will hand you over to Christian to begin.
Thank you, Paul. Right now, he came with us, Juan Carlos. His avatar is Interprets. To me, that has many problems with connection. Maybe in one moment he goes far away. Well, this is thank you for your introduction, Paul. And well, we can begin. Let me see. Okay, with my avatar. Okay, categorizations. Okay, well, I will begin with three-dimensional immersive digital environments. Please excuse me with my English. I am not I'm a speaker from English and Spanish, but I will do my best. I will put in text the things that I am saying to us. If you want to look it in the chat, let me see. Okay. We begin with the introduction. Let me see with another. Okay. These four authors are so important for us because we begin with these authors. Let me put it in. Here it is. Okay. Society is in a time of technology change. The last decade has seen the rise of powerful pocketized computing devices, beginning with the launch of Apple iPhones. In many countries, these devices have become a ubiquitous part of everyday life. Let me say, the Bauman views society as having moved from a stable, definable entity to what he calls liquid modernity, where the only constant is change and knowledge is merely a stringing post from one to another. Thus knowledge today is something to find use, and forget science, anything learned will become outdated. Nikusi continues the analogy of society as liquid, describing how information is omnipresent, spread across multiple places and technologies. Okay, let me put in another chat. Okay, Valdés Godínes discussed the concept of three-dimensional immersive digital environments, 3D IDEs, technology that provide virtual physical experiences. An immersion, the sense of being in a real space, in relation to teaching. He describes how cognitive development can be facilitated by immersion in sensory spaces. The student becomes the builder of skills and innovative ways of learning. 3D IDEs are able to provide these experiences. Maldonado provides evidence for the impact that virtual models can have on the teaching of both technical, scientific and humanistic disciplines. He describes how the virtual can help facilitate the transmission, reception and production of knowledge, and can support students with the process of collaboration. Let me change the next. Okay, I cannot change. Yes, here it is. Okay, and let me put in the chat. Here it is. This paper that we make it used the term of 3D IDEs to describe the overworld space of perception between the real and the virtual. The term came from the analysis of the phenomena found in investigation by me and my teacher, where they raise and describes the limits, challenge, strength, and opportunity of teaching with virtual worlds, and where they proposed of teaching training course in virtual world for educational purpose. The term 3D IDE encompasses all forms of virtual or partially virtual experience. We begin with defining the main terms involved, and if you look the image here, you look the virtual reality, the go far. How it says, Paul? I don't know how it says. GeoFR. Can you help me, please?
So we came up with this with this term, we wanted a way to describe the starting point before any technology has had anything to do with the experience. And there's been a number of different ways that people have used to describe it, but we chose our own, which was good old-fashioned reality. And it came from good old-fashioned AI, which was a term coined to describe a slightly different way of doing a different area. But nonetheless, we wanted this kind of, when people lived in caves and before any technology turned up, that concept of reality as the starting point. So we called it good old-fashioned reality.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And in our part is the digital, the 3D IDEs, the virtual reality, virtual worlds, and the connection in between physical and virtual, the augmented reality. If you look in this diagram, I put, let me see, okay. In the term of 3D IDE, environments refers to extrinsic, organized artificial spaces in which a user can act as though they are in a physical world. Three-dimensional describe the type of representation this space contains, in that the user can move their viewpoint around three axes, although two-dimensional image existing with the 3D spaces. This ability to move around the space in three-dimensional is critical to the environment's ability to create immersion, a sense of being there. Immersive refers to the ability of the user to believe in the experience and act within the environment as though it were real, rather than having to consciously interpret the environment as one will, for example, a text-based environment. Finally, digital describes the technology used to create the environment, contemporary computer-based technology. Note that the term virtual is not included in our description. This is considered superfluous as anything beyond the real golfer is by definition. Virtual, these environments can be implemented in different forms, such as virtual worlds, virtual reality, augmented reality. Each form has its own unique properties. Okay. If you want more details about that, please check our paper, please. This is so extensive. I will change the okay. Well, in this part, previous for making this analysis, we believe this to be the first attempt to categorize the educational affordances of 3D IDEs in general, to give teachers a general purpose approach to assessing current and future 3D IDEs in order to apply them in their teaching practice. Existing categorization schemes focus more on the technology or user interface, without directly extrapolation to the educational benefits. This is so important, please. Most of these categorizations that we found here, they concentrate in the technology or the user interface, not in the other situation of the educational benefits. We found with Commons and Timmermans towards a taxonomy of virtual reality. Milgram, he said a taxonomy of real and virtual world and display integration. Within classification of virtual reality interaction techniques based on user intention. Muhammad, taxonomy, interaction, change, and research directions. Let me see, let me put here, okay, in the chat. This is the person who found it. Okay. The next, please. Okay, thank you. The essential here is, I put here in the chat. Okay. The essential and outstanding characteristic of 3D IDEs is a user connection to experience and interaction with the artificial environments, virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual worlds, or other systems, present or future. The figure shows our analysis. Firstly, Connect system describes the format of the environment provided by the technology platform with which the user can connect. We then analyze 3D IDEs using two global concepts to describe the user experience. One is how the user perceives immersion in a 3D ID, digital perceptive immersion. The other is a type of immersion interaction that can generate pleasure for the user when in the 3D ludic narrative immersion. We follow Juan in describing narrative elements of immersion as the spatial, temporal, and emotional, but we add body and identity to account for the effect of the user's representation in the virtual. Let me pass to the next. Okay, this is the format of connection. Connect systems. First, we consider the way which the digital space is presented to the user, which affect how they perceive and interact with the environment. Masurik look at these elements from the perspective of technology usability, describing different levels of immersion according to the technology involved, more specifically the nature of the interface. This consistent of this nature are shown through a window presented in a computer, which you look at the image. Then the immersion systems, let me see, here is. The immersion system, they are systems that provide an all-around view, all with virtual spaces. We all know about that. And then we propose the next level is neurological system. The neurological system are theoretical future user interface, where a virtual experience is a create thought, a direct connection to a person, nervous system, and on their brain is connected directly with our brain. Well, this is described later as a full deep. Well, in the next pages. Okay, let me see the next image. And with this is the experience. Okay, the experience, space, time, body, and identity, which describes a person's perception, and those spells of a 3D ID using for categorize space, time, body, and identity, and the interaction between them. These categories are described, not hierarchical. The categories will later be applied to the use of the 3D IDEs for educational purpose. Let me see. Martinez Ojeda described the traditional vision of space and time, in which the fundamental parameters of the location of human beings and the distribution of natural phenomena that affect them. With respect to the virtual spaces, there are two potential representations. The first is explained by Martinez Ojeda as a cyberspace, a space removed from the emotionally characteristic of traditional societies, and the distinctions of square of place, yet incorporate into the hierarchical. And then the body and identity, let me put here, describes how the word virtual comes from medieval Latin virtualis, which in turn describes from virtus, strength and potency, and its current use, the term virtual is often used to express a pure absence of physicality. For this reason, and reflecting the non-space places in cyberspace, we can conclude that in modern computing, the material, the computer, becomes transparent with an aural communicating space. Focus on information flows. Okay, this is body and identity. This is the main part of our research. And then we put in the other parts, that is the level of the immersion. This is a perception. Let me put it here in the chat. Here is, okay. Digital perceptual immersion, DPI, immersion, as a general concept, describes the extent to which a user has transferred aspects of their perception from the physical to the virtual. DPI relates to the user perception of the digital environment. Different levels of immersion can be achieved in relation to space, time, body, and identity. In this place, the first part of these levels are the third-person immersion. The lowest, least immersive level of DPI consists of interaction in the virtual environment from a third-person perspective. The user observes a representation of themselves, a digital body, or an avatar, and control the representation to interact with a digital environment of their behalf. This is how we can do it with Second Life. Then, the second level is conscious immersion. With third-person immersion, the interaction occurs in a real time. However, it is possible for the user attention to become sufficiently captive that the distinction between actual and apparent time becomes blurred. This creates a deeper level of immersion, conscious immersion. Similarly, the user may attain a complete spatial awareness, acting as though they are located with a virtual space. One may compare this to watching an engaging film, or one may be transported to alternative locations. Then we look at the next level, that is total immersion. The total immersion, the third level of DPI, arises from a true first-person interaction. This is where the experience is sufficiently engaging, and technology is able to provide a visual and audio experience of being present in the digital environment without any obvious distractions of the physical world. There is no sense of an avatar intermediary. Typically, this requires seeing and hearing the digital environment as though or when we are present with a 3D viewing, giving nearly objects depth, and the view and sounds changing appropriately as one turns one head. And finally, with this distinguish, we can look the full deep is, well, is matrix. It is a distinguish of being human that we try to change our environment to suit our needs and desires. Even without technology, storytelling is a powerful way of experiencing a different situation to the physical life in which we find ourselves. Well, this is like a matrix. I say like matrices. I don't know which is the real and the digital. And the next, please. Okay. And finally, in this part, I will say it about the ludic narrative immersion. The concept of ludic narrative immersion comes from Rueda, where she proposed a compatibility between ludic immersion and narrative immersion. along with the idea of the actor who builds their own narrative, as described by Janet Murray. In terms of 3D IDE, we find a mutual coexistence between 4 types of ludic narrative immersion: space, time, body, and identity. The fusion of these 4 appears as a 5th element, that is, emotions. I will put quickly these elements. The ludic narrative immersion, Space Hall, in his book The Hidden Dimension, describes how everything that humans do is related to the experience of space, within which sensory that is understood. In his related work, Hall described how spatial change one's communication, and sometimes even exceed the spoken word. Then we can say about the ludic narrative immersion. Time Hall described how time can speak more clearly than words, because it is manipulated in a more controlled manner and is subject to less distortion than spoken language. Time can indicate the importance of the occasion, as well as whatever in an interaction between people should take place. Time is not only about duration, but can also refer to the sequence of events. Ludic narrative immersion, body, in understanding of the body role in immersion, Leviton points out the body generates and maintains many of these bases of individual and collective existence. The body in the world is the space and the time in which reality is anchored. The idea of territory exists because there is a body, physical or virtual. Those body underlines many social and cultural aspects of reality. In the virtual body is an important point of connection to the space-time of the virtual and affects the interaction with these elements. Ludic narrative immersion. Identity is necessary to understand and to reflect on the construction of identity. Let me see. Okay, yeah. Okay, the identity, excuse me. Sanchez Martino described identity as a basic principle behind one's social definition. There is a strong relationship between the body in the virtual environment and a person identity, as previously described with the male participants and female avatars. Well, here Rudman can speak more about these identity situations. Then we finish with this, is with the ludic narrative immersion. The this type of immersion is the result of the interaction of the 4 aspects of ludic narrative immersion: space, time, body, and identity. One form of ludic narrative immersion created from the emotional relates to the social interactions that recreate the combination of impressions. Juan describes how individuals try to limit the complex universe of emotions by combining emotions that come from life in the physical with emotions centered in the virtual. Interaction with the virtual person and others generates interactivity and the feeling of being personally concerned with both the characters and others. And well, we finish with that my part. I look that Dr. Juan Carlos is gone. Maybe he have problem with his avatar. He passed to me his conversation. I put here and I try to read it for us. Let me see. He tried to explain towards immersive ludic learning the educational possibilities of 3D IDEs. And the idea of immersion for the current pedagogy, which tries to explain the educational process arising from the use of digital technologies, is a very powerful explanation too, because it allows us to carry out and analyze beyond a predominantly dichotomous perspective regarding the relationship between ICT and education as separate entities. The idea of immersion makes it possible to understand the relationship that exists between both aspects as a continuum, since digital technology, unlike alphabetic technology, implies that the user can carry out immersion activities within technology and not only with its help. Let me pass with order. Okay. This approach, so simple in appearance, implies, among other aspects, change in the way of building knowledge and therefore in the pedagogical perspective of constructivism, and cognitive basic because the epistemological relationship arising from reading through the book and the alphabetical writing is different from the present in immersive media. Both three-dimensional and playful, it is a less described and flat immersion. It is more in the plane of experimental and sensory. Hence, it is located in a playful dimension but with characteristic pleasurable. Let me put the next. Okay. Now, enjoyable ludic can be used by a teacher as a basic for teaching strategies. Based on this conception, which places the teacher as a basic actor of the possibility of implementing an immersive teaching process as a construction of knowledge with fun leisure basis. Hence, the importance of analyzing the idea of 3D IDEs and understanding their characteristic to change their pedagogical and didactic possibilities, taking into account the importance of body structure and three-dimensional identity as a pleasurable, playful tools that promote forms learning alternatives. We propose the use of ludic elements as a part of a pedagogic strategy, not as an end in itself. The ludic elements create pleasure in learning. They are not applied in the sense of a game, even if a game is played for the purpose of competing or winning or obtaining some reward. A pedagogy with a ludic emotional basis allows the student to be freer in exploring and making decisions in the learning process, exploring the content based upon their interest rather than a regiment sequence prescribed by the teacher. This is what I am saying here, and I put here the opportunity to use 3D IDEs for educational purpose is a good time to establish and consider the ludic emotional pleasure element of learning because the technology is pleasurable by its nature. And to finish this, let me see. One of the main ideas of this paper is to contribute the construction of this pedagogy. It is not a question of transferring the practice of the traditional classroom into the virtual space and continue to reproduce established school dynamics. The pedagogical possibilities of 3D IDEs go further, requiring theoretical, conceptual, and methodological approaches from perspectives other than those traditional employed by school pedagogy. And this is all for Juan Carlos. And the next is from Paul. Please, Paul.
Thank you, Christian. So, let's take a look. I'm going to start off really reiterating a little bit of Juan Carlos's message, the idea of schools being something that is traditional, and tradition is not always the best way of doing things. We seem to be going ahead of ourselves here. So, this is a photo of a rather old school classroom, and being slightly older than some of you here, I do actually remember this type of classroom from. And there was a very definite case of, this is what you're going to learn, it's in the book, learn it. So I imagine that there was a hope, there was a girls' school as well. Jade. So yes, I must stop reading the chat, otherwise I'll keep replying to people. The question is, why was it like that, and should it always be like that? Well, it was because there was a sense of, this is what people need to learn. I suppose it came originally from a religious point of view, that this is how we're going to instruct people, new people to the world, in how to behave. Whereas things moved on. So, as I said at the beginning, I recently worked at the University of Leicester on a virtual world project to create some virtual genetics labs and trial them out with students. And I'll mention that a little bit more in a little while. But on almost the first day, I decided to go and look at laboratory to see what was going on. So, a photo somebody else took. I wanted in the lab, it was empty. There's room for 120 students. The TV screens on the wall are not just there to show information, they're also showing the teacher, because some of the students can't see the teacher, he or she is so far away and behind a column or whatever. And it's actually quite a scary place. It's like going to a hospital for the first time. It's just, there's all this equipment, there's stuff that you touch in case it blows up or something. And talking to the students later as part of interviews for the project, we found that this was actually the case. Some of them have never been inside a laboratory of any description. They didn't have one at the school. It's just completely new to them. So here we have such an opposite of what we had on the previous slide of the school, because yes, they're learning, yes, there's a curriculum and things to learn, but no, they're not being told exactly how to do it. Part of that is because it's more of a practical thing, and part of that is because we've moved a bit beyond the book. In the paper, Juan Carlos talks about the book as the basic technology of school, and text as the way in which the process of learning is expected to happen. And we've been benefiting stroke handicapped by that process ever since the schools first began, really. So here we have something more ludic, that's probably the word. Easier, more natural, not regimented, not sit there, do this, learn it exactly like that. So, one of the things we wanted to do with the Virtual World project was to help students within this environment. There's plenty of ways of helping learners learn text, but there's not so many ways of helping learners learn to be ludic in an environment like this. I think this is, yeah, some keywords, I guess. Instruction to construction and compliance to interest. So all these slides will be available in the I don't know what it's called, but it's nearby, and it's a place where all the all the presentations are going to sit afterwards. And worksheets, yeah. So actually, just going back to this, the students do have worksheets in this lab, in the sense that they have instructions of what they're supposed to do. Yes, thanks, Maggie. And this can be a little bit problematic, because here we're trying to link up text on the worksheets of which chemical to add to what and in what quantities and everything, with practicalities of actually picking up the mechanisms for doing what they've been told and pushing the right buttons and so forth. And with the third thing, which is the theory behind what they're doing. And it's quite difficult, sometimes impossible, for students to encompass all three of those things at the same time. So that was another thing we wanted to try and help them to do, to relate the theory with the practice. So, sorry, I'm reading the text again. Never did multitasking. One of the things we're trying to do in this paper is to look at what's been done in Second Life and to abstract the main learnings, if that's a noun, and to put them out in a way that they can be reused as new technologies come up, with, as I said, the categorization scheme helping to understand what where the new technology sits and which learnings are relevant to that new technology. So if we zip back forward again. Oh yes. Okay. So the third part of the paper is some guidelines based upon what we learnt, not just with the genetics experiment, but generally working in Second Life for 3 years, and to pick out the main areas that we saw that technology being helpful in education, and to describe it in a way that would fit with new technologies that provide this type of interaction, or better, the type of interaction that Christian has been talking about, this anything up to the what he calls the full deep, which comes from partly from sci-fi films, partly from where we want to be, the full deep experience being where you connect up some technology and the world you experience is the built by computer environment. You don't experience the physical world that you're in anymore. You experience what the computer wants you to experience with all your senses, as though it were completely real. We may never get there, or we may, but the technologies that we are producing, such as, you know, the Rift and the HoloLens, they seem to be going as far as they can in that direction, as fast as they can, which actually is quite fast. So I'm going to zip through the areas that we identified. First of all, the field trip. We used it to have a field trip to a genetics laboratory. These are first year students. This is, well, it would have been before they'd ever been in the real lab, but because research is always difficult, they'd already been in the lab but when they saw this. But they still found it helpful. And this essentially is a field trip to the lab. The point being that you can look at things, you can poke things, you can ask questions about things. You can't damage anything. You can't pour acid on your hand. You can't set fire to anything. It's a safe space, but still it represents in sufficient ways the genetics laboratory. And the students said that they felt they were learning from it. The key elements, so we have body identity, space, time as 4 elements to look for in experiences and in things that the technology can offer, the affordances. So I've just identified 3 here. Body and identity. We asked for students to wear a lab coat as avatars, not in real life, and to act as though they're in laboratory. You know, it may sound a minor thing, but actually there are rules. It's not even rules, it's etiquette, how to behave in a laboratory. It's something that I worried for students. Should I stand here? Can I lean on that? What should I do with my phone? Don't use it. And so forth. So this idea, they are taking on the identity of someone who is in a lab, and that's actually quite a big thing for those people at that time. So we got them to wear the lab coat, we got them to not fly, which was funny, and so forth. So we're giving them the experience, and that really is what the field trip is about. It's giving somebody the experience of being somewhere in ways which don't really work just by watching a video or other non-immersive technology. And just another one quickly, because I quite like this. This is a Buddhist meditation space. If one has ever tried meditating or going to a Japanese garden or somewhere like that, it has a sense about it which can affect the way you feel, and that's not something that you get by looking at the photo. So just walking around, hearing the sounds, seeing the different layouts from different angles, it's a different sense of understanding. So the field trip, going somewhere, just being somewhere, we feel is perhaps the first thing to list on what these and future technologies can do. And as the technology gets better, so it will become more immersive and more effective. So I was going to say something else, but I read the chat box again and that completely threw me. Okay, number 2, role play. So one of my favourite ones, I've not listed it here, but there is some people in Australia were doing experiments with moot courts. Is that it? A type of judicial system whereby you have a judge and so forth, and they set up a courtroom and they gave students different roles. One person was the judge, one was the accused, etc., etc. And the results from that were really very interesting. They found that very effective. For role play, what I've listed is something that I had a little experience with around about 2014. The US Army tried out Second Life, and then they created their own system on a project called Moses. And they wanted to train soldiers to be more able to interact with people. So this setup that they created was supposedly a village in somewhere such as Afghanistan, and what they were doing was they were trying to train the soldiers to interact with the locals, obtain information, but do so in an appropriate way, and as opposed to just making the matter worse. And they invited members of the public to volunteer to be villagers and various other characters within the setting. As this wasn't an actual training exercise, it was to try out the technology. They did actually go on and use the technology for some training. Then they discovered virtual reality and scrapped this and moved on, which is fair enough. But the point is that the role-playing worked remarkably well given the abilities of the technology at that time. And the more interactive, the more real, the further down the list of digital perceptual immersion that you go, the more success, the more effective the role-playing. Just another quick one on role-playing, which I quite liked. There was some people used it to help teenagers who had had very difficult experiences in life, and the therapists were finding it very difficult to get the teenagers to talk about these experiences, let alone talk to each other. So they set up a virtual world space and got each of the people, patients, teenagers, to go in as avatars from separate physical locations. And they chatted to each other about their difficult experiences because it was anonymous, because nobody could physically stare at them. This sense of anonymity can be really useful role-playing, and also it helps create the sense of identity, which is really essentially what's going on. You're taking on the identity of someone. It may be your own identity that you don't want people to know about usually, or it may be another identity, but the role play is the second of what we think of really effective ways of learning within virtual spaces. Number 3, experience. This is perhaps my favourite. It's the hallucinations sim in Second Life. I think it's still there. It was last time I looked. Virtual hallucinations. And, oh yes, schizophrenia I've called it. So, what happens is, as you walk through as an avatar, first of all, you're hearing this voice saying negative things about yourself and about what you should do. It should be, the voice in your ears will be saying how worthless you are and how you should kill yourself and so forth. And these are the sort of things which schizophrenic people have to deal with. And things like the floor here is changed to a sky, a poster with text on, maybe some words will appear to be highlighted to the person, and those words, the characters that are highlighted, make up a really negative message of some description. It's a very powerful experience to go through, even as an avatar, and by all means go and look at it, but be warned, it is quite affecting. And I came away from that with a different view of what schizophrenia is. I really feel that I've learnt something about that type of situation. Yes, Maggie, you left halfway through. I don't blame you. You don't need to go through the whole of it to get the point, really. So it's not just this. Another one, it was, I'm not sure if it was set up, created by the US Army, but it was in that area, and I don't know if it's still available. Basically, you can go in and have an experience driving through well, a village in a part of the world where the US have troops, and something bad happens. There's an explosion, some of your colleagues are killed, and it's all done as avatars, obviously. And then the second part of it is you go into a regular marketplace. Sorry, I said village, it was in a marketplace in a village. Then you go into, like a shopping mall in the West, and something happens that triggers the memory. So something similar will happen to the avatar that happened in the village prior to the explosion, and then you get the memories coming back within the shopping mall. So I'm not describing it very well, but nonetheless, thank you, Lux. Yes, it's another very powerful experience, and this is only as an avatar on a 2D screen. As technology gets more immersive, so it will become even more of a memorable experience. If even more is necessary. Question. Number 4, simulation. So, in a way, everything is a simulation, but by simulation I mean attempts to simulate some very specific reality. So, University of Leicester, before I joined, the same department used an oil rig in Second Life for the occupational psychology master's students, and they were, well, the tutors were wanting them to learn about people's behaviour, so they had the students wander around. You can see a little image at the top, wander around the oil rig, and there was various things. There were fire extinguishers missing, there was somebody had left a cigarette burning, there were doors which were locked, all the things you shouldn't do on an oil rig. So their task was to make a list of the things within the context, but that wasn't the point of it in actual fact, because what we did was we set fire to it, virtually, obviously. So we set up, we created some flames, some smoke. We set up some alarms saying warning, warning, fire, evacuate immediately. And we hadn't told the students we did do. Well, big chaos. They'd been walking around perfectly fine as avatars before, but no, they're all running around as avatars, falling over each other, trying to get through the wrong door, falling off the edge of the platform into the sea. It was very interesting. And I think we learned from that you can simulate all sorts of interesting things. The point being that this is what happens if try and evacuate a place, cause under kind of panic conditions. People do not just wander out nicely. You know, like they used to test aeroplanes, the evacuation of aeroplanes, by having volunteers sitting in the seats, and they would say, right, now we want you to pretend that there's a fire, and please leave it, please, in an orderly fashion. And people would get up and leave in an orderly fashion on this airplane sitting on the ground, whatever. And then someone had a bright idea of, no, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give £5 or $5 to the first 5 people that get out. That's all they did. Just a slight change. Right, so please leave in orderly fashion, pretend there's a fire, off you go. Well, everybody ran, everyone fell over each other. They didn't get out very well at all. And that was just for 5. And yeah, so you can, just by simulating something, you don't have to have it absolutely perfectly identical. You just need it sufficiently the same so that the thing that you're interested in is going to be replicated or seen, as it were. And just a couple of other things on simulation. Here, this is someone created a Bloom's taxonomy in 3D. So this is like the simulation of an abstract process within the physical world. And I quite like that. I have no idea how effective it is, but I suspect it is probably more effective at learning it than just seeing it on a piece. In the virtual world experiment, we called it SWIFT, Second World Interactive, no, Immersive Future Learning. That's it. You see, I still can't remember it. So the genetics department, if you look at the top left picture, they had this game, really a game I suppose, but what they would do is they would give half a dozen students a pack of these cards. And I don't know if any of you know these books that you have, which adventure books. Okay, thanks for coming, Leaping. These adventure books where you read page 1, it says you're in a dark cavern and there's a troll at the end. If you want to try and kill the troll, go to page 7. If you want to run out of the cavern, go to page 92. and so forth, and you follow that through. So I don't know, Sheila, but I'll try and find out, and I'll put it on the slide in the place where it's going to be. So the students will be given these cards, and basically they're cards. It's to learn about doing processes within genetics research. So you can see on the next slide, on the next picture, top right, or in fact the teaching fellow Susan Lavelle converted the cards into a flowchart, and then we pasted the flowchart on the ground on the Sky platform, and we landscaped it, and we got the students to wander around. So they're doing exactly the same thing. They're just going through the cards, reading what's on each card, or in this case the pop-up huge notice, and then deciding which direction to go, which in this case is walking. So again, we've converted an abstract or physical in a different way into an abstract into a simulation of it. And that was the third part, which alas was never published. Maybe it will one day. Oh yes, and just a little picture of the students using it. Okay, we're nearly there. Number 5, artistic medium. So I tried a system. It was, I forget which technology it was, but there were location beacons. So location beacons, so you could walk as you moved your head around left and right, so everything registered correctly. It wasn't the Rift, it was one of the others. And there was a handheld thing, and you could basically spray paint in the air, and it stayed there, and so you could paint in 3D in the air. I'm not such an artist, okay, so I didn't create anything wonderful, but I could see how in the right hands even that relatively straightforward tool could create some very interesting outputs, which as the technology improves will become more and more. You could imagine creating three-dimensional things in the real world, or apparently in the real world, if you had the right technology. So here is something in Second Life. Someone's created a three-dimensional light sculpture in 3D, which you can walk around. Once technology gets to the point where we have at least total immersion with a technology that looks and feels like you're really there, but is connected to the rest of the world. So you see the real world, but you also see the art. You could imagine having a whole art exhibition of really intricate and interesting three-dimensional or other. I won't even say it has to be three-dimensional, because there are other things which could be done. It could be done two-dimensionally in a very unusual way. It's a whole new world, basically, and I think the artists at some point will take it on board. Oh, hello, Juan Carlos. Okay. Number 6, personal tutor. This is really, really interesting, because when I did my PhD, I designed something of this nature. It listened into spoken conversations and worked out where the people were talking within the domain being discussed, and then created text prompts to the learner of related information that would be really useful to understand, taking into account what they're currently talking about. And so when I see this happening in the virtual world, I get really excited, because everything you do in the virtual space goes through the computer. So the computer is in a splendid position to take account of what the person has done, what they've learnt, maybe what they haven't learnt, what they have to repeat, and to help them by offering information that is just key and relevant right now to what they're trying to learn, as opposed to just simply randomly related information. And I can see that this, once the technology is there and once AI is up to speed and able to make those decisions, I can see the equivalent of a little tiny headset which, as the student goes through their learning, is constantly like a personal tutor, just sitting there going, how about thinking about that, or this might be useful. So what we did in the Swift experiment, the second one, was we created this big laboratory. And remember I said that students have trouble connecting the three things, connecting what they're supposed to be doing, push this button next, what they're actually doing, where's the button, and why they're doing it, what does the button do in terms of changing the genetics that are inside the machine. So we tried to give them the experience. We tried to replicate the laboratory, replicate the procedure. So first you press this button, then you pour that liquid in there, then you open this, then you do that, then you switch on this, and so forth. But take away the difficult bit of actually manipulating all these fiddly little pieces of equipment so that they could concentrate on connecting the theory and the process. And we found that students really liked that, because by abstracting out the important stuff, important in terms of learning what's going on, obviously tinkering with the equipment is also important, but still, by taking out the theory and the process, they were able to concentrate on the two and link them together. So here we have the excellent example of what we were doing. They've put some stuff in this box in the middle of the screen of the picture in front of the avatar. That box is a water bath, so it's just a box of water held at a certain temperature. They've put something in there, something's going to happen to the molecules that are inside. And what we're showing here is a 3D animation of what's happening to the genetic material whilst it sits in that water bath. So, whereas in reality they are just simply putting it there and then waiting 20 minutes or whatever. Here, because we can squash up time and we can show above the actual object what's going on, they get a different experience. They put it in the water bath, they press start on the stopwatch or whatever, and they see what's going on. So it's in context, it's at the right moment. Oops. So that's that. That's personal tutor. So here we go. Some summaries that you can see. These are the things which from our experience in using the virtual world, these are the things which seem to usually work well and which look very much as though they should be explored in new technologies as they come along. It's very easy for a new technology to turn up and people to go, wow, look, it's new, and then not look at what's been done before because it's old technology. No, don't worry about that. But we really want people to learn from what all the wonderful things that have been done in Second Life and in other virtual worlds, and to start from that point, not start from the beginning as the new technologies turn up. SwiftLab was in Second Life. Unfortunately, as is the case of all research, we ran out of money and we couldn't afford to keep the space. But it could be recreated if anybody ever wanted to fund it. So, yeah. Guidelines, I guess. I used to say treat it as real because the memory is real, which it is. But as technology improves, it will actually be real as far as the person is concerned. So it becomes less and less of a matter. But nonetheless, even when a simulation is quite croaky and blocky, it feels real when you look back on it later. And that's kind of the point. The learning happened. Yeah. And I've written the best pedagogies are experiential constructivist. That's really I think, my understanding of Juan Carlos's message. That we need to consider moving beyond the book and the text as the basic technology, and the requirements to learn specifics rather than what one needs or wants to learn within an area, and to create what's important for the learning experience. So yeah, those are the guidelines, and I see Juan Carlos is back, I hope, with us. Let me see, are you here? And Christian read out your prepared words. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Let's see what happens. Okay. Christian, are you still with us?
Yes, I am still with us, but I don't know if Juan Carlos is here.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say, Christian, before we wrap up?
Well, the most important thing when I talk with Paul, when I try to, with my ideas I have with Juan Carlos is gone. I have problem with his connection. Well, the important thing of this paper, or how I will begin this paper, was the difficult to understand why persons say, "Oh, these virtual worlds are right now is not the good thing. Virtual reality is the good thing right now, or augmented reality is more important than virtual worlds." And something that we listen about, the person that make research about the three-dimensional environments, and I say to Paul, I have many questions, and I want to have an answer of these questions, but this answer I want to be to interpret not for technical answers. I don't want the instrumental answers. I want a theoretical answer. I want a pedagogical answer about how to make how to teach with this technology, and the technology is not important. The theory is important. How to understand this theory, and when I talk with Juan Carlos and we talk with Paul say, okay, we make it. We try to work 1 year. I don't know which time make this for this paper. More about 1 year. But yes, I don't remember. It's like 1.5 year. I don't know, 1 year. But the important thing of this paper is to say we have the answer about the elements of how to teach in these three-dimensional environments. Immersive is the most important concept that we understand. That the immersive concept shows us to understand that technical instruments is not the first important thing that a teacher have to understand how to teach in these environments. And this is the important thing. And I like Paul, and I like when I talk with Paul, because he have many experience in these virtual worlds, how my ideas and ideas of Juan Carlos, he make the ideas and say, yes, we're making that, but we don't have the concept to explain that. And we tried with this paper to explain all the things that many researchers have making for understand how we are making, and not only say my ideas or my experience, and say we have concepts that understand this problematic of how to teach in these environments. I don't know if you want to say other thing, Paul.
No, I think we'd better stop. We've probably had our time. I'll just want to pull up the thank yous pages, because there are a lot of people obviously involved in all these projects. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll hang about just to, if anyone wants to chat. But is there anyone have any burning question that they'd like to ask before we all sort of move on?
Eugene.
My work, yes. That's an interesting one, actually. Yes, it's true. It does. So what I would say is that we used to have newspapers as the only way in which things were disseminated, and then we had radio, but the newspapers carried on, and then we had television, and the newspapers carried on. Now we have the internet, and the newspapers, okay, they're not doing so well, but they're still there. And so I think technologies don't really get superseded completely. They get they perhaps chipped away at the edges of the things they're used for. But if they have a core utility, they don't disappear. The same will happen with Second Life and so forth.
Yes, the question of Sheila, yes, the concept that I try to put in the first place is pedagogy, because always when we read a paper, we always look the technology in the first place, and the technology, and when in all the years when the past gone, and read these papers, and if we read a paper and say the first technology is right now is obsolete, many persons say this paper is obsolete, and I don't want that. I want to try that the concepts that we are trying to explain with you and with other persons is making that is not important. It's not important the technology, and it's more important the pedagogy, the society, and many other things. And this is why the idea of this point of the paper.
Okay. Any other burning questions before we?
Well, the thing that Maggie said about the third person, the idea of the paper is to say that the immersion, we have different ways to look the immersion, different steps, like third immersion, conscious immersion, full deep immersion, or like matrix, like the full deep immersion. And actually, we try to explain that when the teacher have to make a didactic and say, my strategy of this didactic in this class, I need the third person because because it's important for me, because I want to know that my students know that the identity of the avatar, and I want to look the avatar and not like the full immersion that is not looking the avatar, his avatar. And this is the strategy. If we have this concept, is to look how the teacher understands these environments. If the teacher is looking in third person and his students want to look in third person, it's because have actually an element to look the avatar, and this is the element of avatar, identity, space, and time. And this is why these four elements is so important for understand the levels of immersion. And when that teacher understands these elements, it is more easy to make a strategy for didactic in his classroom.
Yes, and I suppose the issue of body, it does relate to if you have full immersion, full deep, and you just believe that you're somewhere where you're not. You see your arms, perhaps you might look down and see your body, but it's not quite the same as seeing an avatar with a lab coat on, for example. It makes it perhaps a bit more obvious that the body has changed, that the identity has changed. But yes, there's interesting, so much to discuss, but I think perhaps we need to wrap up now. So thank you for coming along and listening to us. We really appreciate it. It's been great fun. And please feel free to download a copy of the paper. There's a note card in the little bit box telling you how to do it. So, oops. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation for us. And if you want to make more questions, please in the MOOC, maybe we will put a question, or you put your questions, and we try to answer that. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Okay. Bye.